Hey, I'm Dan, and this is Dan's Planes. This is the start of the rebuild of the Blackhorse Focke 190. Princess is all over quality control, making sure everything is there and in good order. Previously, I looked at it when I purchased it and it got delivered and everything was fine. So I've got a new fuselage and tail. So I've got to transfer everything from the one that semi-cartwheeled to this new one. So that's going to take some time to dismantle that and then put it all back together again. Goliath is checking out his new fortress. Everything is turning out fine. So first step is unpack, and then I've read through the manual that I got from the person who sold me the 190, and I see how it was put together, so that tells me how I can take it apart and then put it back together again. Just do it piece by piece until it's done. Right, Goliath? Yeah, man of little words. She is unpacked, ready to go. I noticed there's damage. That's broken, and that came out of there. It's an easy enough fix, but it's a little frustrating having any damage at all on a brand new thing, especially an expensive brand new thing. But we'll fix it and move on. No one will ever know. Checking over the rest of the parts, everything else looks good. I didn't realize I'm going to have to epoxy all these hinges. I would have thought they would have been done at the factory, but nope, those slackers. 90% complete, my butt. All right then, time to get on it. Oh, well, hi. You're always introducing segments, aren't you? All right, so just wanted to make a note that the first step is to take something like petroleum jelly on a Q-tip and put it in the gap of the hinge itself. Kind of move it back and forth a little bit to work it in there, so when I put the epoxy in, if it oozes out, it does not epoxy this this hinge to where it won't move. That's kind of one-on-one on epoxying in hinges, but just wanted to mention that I'm going to do that on this. So it might take a minute to do that on all these hinges, but we will do that, and then I'm going to use a 15-minute Z-epoxy for the epoxy. And I'll try to clean up any over spillage with rubbing alcohol and pieces of paper towel. Okay, boys and girls, I made a rookie error. It's been a while since I've put together control surfaces, and I did not pay attention to the gap. This gap should have been non-existent. I left space where the hinge point had room to move, but that was not the right thing to do. I could have and should have had this gap closer. So what I did, because air can get through there, and if enough air gets through there, it can make your control surfaces not work, be ineffective. So what I've done is an old trick where you take clear packing tape and you put the surface down like that, put your tape over it. That way you're guaranteed that it has enough movement to go down and to go up. It'll then make this noise because the tape is touching itself, but that's what I got to do. So I did that on both stabilizers and on the rudder. So cautionary tale, don't be a dummy like Dan, and keep an eye on your gap width. Okay, I've now fixed this. Just used some thin CA here, some thick CA there. Just got to wait 10 minutes and let it cure, let it dry, and that'll be taken care of. Next steps, I cut away the covering here and put in the stab joiner tube, and on each of the control surfaces I went through and cut where the control horn is going to go. Now, when I received my last Focke Wulf from the seller, he only had these 2 retaining bolts holding it on. Now there's not a lot of depth in here, but I think the directions are kind of confusing. They mention a step to cut away film on the stab, which would be right along here, so that you can epoxy it and put it in. But having tanked my last Focke Wulf, and on the last one having used Gorilla Glue all around the tube and then along here, it became apparent to me that when I had to replace the broken fuselage, I also had to replace the tail because I couldn't take the tail off. And I believe the bolts are put on here so that you're able to take the tail off if that's how you want to store it in your trailer or vehicle of whatever kind. So I'm not sure that I should epoxy this, because if I tank it again, I don't want to have to buy another tail section, or if I crack up the tail section, I don't want to have to buy a tail section and a fuselage, because trying to dig out the epoxy along here would be a long, arduous process. So I'm not sure what to do yet, but what I do know is I can't get these screws out of my previous Focke Wulf, bolts. So I'm going to have to order them. So I'm going to have to do that before too long. I can still put on the stabs and elevators and go ahead and put on the control surfaces and then just come back and put those bolts on. But it's a matter of, am I going to epoxy it? So reached out to a friend of mine, Mike, who also has one of these, and I'm asking his opinion on it. It was my opinion that I didn't like that loose stabilizer because there was a lot of wiggle when it was only these 2 bolts. And I didn't like that on a giant scale plane. But, this does support it. And then you've got a couple posts here that help keep it where it needs to be kept. So maybe those bolts are enough. But I reached out and asked him. I'll get his opinion. In the meantime, I got to order these bolts. I've checked my epoxy status, and I have that Scotch brand, basically high sol replacement that I think is 30 or 60 minutes, but it's kind of a creamish color, and I don't really want that around the edge of my stabs. Otherwise, I've got 15-minute epoxy, and the problem is I've got to put the wings on and put the stabs on and make sure they're level to the wings and make sure they're equidistant on both sides from the back of the wing tips to the front of the stabs tips. So I want to have 30-minute epoxy so I have some more handling time, and I want it to be clear, so I'm going to have to make a trip to Lowe's to get that. In the meantime, I pulled out the left and right elevator, servo, and push rods, and I tried to pull out the rudder control horn, and there's one bolt that goes through the rudder that screws into the control horn on both sides, and that bolt is a hex bolt and it's stripped. So I'm now going to try to cut a slot in it to hopefully use a slotted screwdriver to get it out, because I really don't want to have to buy a whole hardware packet just to get that rudder piece. So just another kick in the pants for having crashed in the first place and not having gone around because it was going too fast, or killing the engine, one of the two. So I feel like I'm going to be kicking myself in the pants all through this as I run into challenges, but it's what it's going to take to get through it, so we'll continue on. Here is the rudder mechanism that's on both sides, and there is a bolt here that goes through, and I got it partially removed, about I don't know, how far is that? It's about 3/16 of an inch, but the rest of it's got to come out. So I'm gonna use a cutting bit to cut a slot in it, and then try a flathead screwdriver. We have success. The screw gods were with me. I was able to drill that slot in there and slowly take it out with a flathead screwdriver. So now I'm going to have to make bigger holes here to push this through, because I'm trying to save my wiring. So make a bigger hole, push this through. Then on the new fuselage, I'll put a wheel collar on the bottom of some kite string, make its hole bigger on the fuselage, push the wheel collar into there, and the weight of it will pull the string down the fuselage to where I can then attach it to this and pull it back towards me to pull this through again on both sides. That's my plan of attack. So moving along piece by piece. Well, my plan for pulling out the pull-pull system and retaining my pull-pull wires has been thwarted. I didn't realize that those wires go through this plastic channel. So that goes all the way through the airplane. And I'm not going to be cutting through the channel, which would be a real fun exercise in futility. Unfortunately, I'm just going to have to clip these ends, and I'm going to have to get new cabling. A buddy of mine, Mike, turned me on to fish line for cabling, and they also have the clamps here, so I'm probably going to pick that up. So I'm going to have to wait for that on order for the rudder and for the tail wheel. I can at least undo the tail wheel and cut the wiring, but then I'll be stuck. So I'm going to go order that. We can do another step while we're waiting on parts. I took my pen and went along the edge here to make a mark. Then I'm going to pull out the stab, and I'm going to go to the right of that mark about 1/16 of an inch and very delicately and lightly cut through, hopefully just the covering, not the wood, and cut it through to be able to remove the covering on the right hand side on this one, for example. That way I'm applying epoxy to wood and it's going into wood, not covering onto wood to where the covering could peel off and the epoxy is not adhering it anymore. So that's what I'm going to do. You want to do it ever so gently and cut just the covering, because if you cut the wood, you weaken that wood and make it more prone to be able to break this way or this way when G-forces are applied. So those are the next steps. Now that I've pulled the stabs out from the fuselage, I see it really only has about a 1/16 of material to be removed, so I'm going to have to remove it all, but I'm going to stay on the inside of that pen mark, because I don't want to cut the covering short and be able to see the wood where this connects to the fuselage, and I don't want it short and then shrink up when the sun is on it and show wood. So I'm going to very carefully cut a sliver there. And I'm going to use 220 sandpaper and sand that graphite so it's a nice coarse surface with a bunch of very fine, what would you call them, indentations maybe, or score marks, so the epoxy will adhere to that really well. And then I'll clean it. Then I'll epoxy it. Alright, covering is removed, and graphite or carbon is sanded. So we are all set to epoxy once I get it, which I will get it tomorrow. Yeah, princess, say goodbye. Oh, there she goes on her stool. Okay, say goodbye. Good girl. I've installed the left and right elevator servos and the control linkages, and put the end pieces on there, the control horns. So I went to Lowe's. They don't carry 30-minute epoxy, so I had to order some online, waiting for that to come in, also waiting on my 4 bolts to come in so I can put the tail on. But everything's ready. Also waiting on my 60-pound stainless steel fish leader line that I'll use for the pull, so I can do the rudder and the tail wheel. I've installed the gear switch and the gear mechanism. I've installed the ignition switch. There are still 2 other switches to install, which the previous seller had installed on the bottom. I'll have to see how to get in there, if there's a way to get in there. I might just put them here on either side. We'll see. And I just finished putting triangle stock on the firewall. My buddy Mike has also a Blackhorse 190, and he said after about 40 flights now his firewall is coming loose. So I used the Scotch Weld DP460 that I've used in the past with good success. This was what I bought when there was an outage of Hysol. So I compared the specs, and it's very comparative. So it's very similar. I also added triangle stock here. So all in all, hopefully that's gonna help with that. So I removed the spinner and the propeller. The propeller center hole is so freaking tight, I could barely get that thing off. I'm gonna slightly enlarge that by like 1 millimeter or something, if even that, just to make it a little easier to get on and off. And that means, let's see, I've removed the ignition module that goes here. So I've got to remove the choke servo and the throttle servo so I can get those installed in here. But all in all, we are coming along, slow but steady, slow but sure. I'm not sure if I mentioned this. I used that Scotch weld, but I also put in this milled fiberglass. So again, trying to add strength. We'll see how it does. Say goodbye, princess. Good girl. She and Goliath, for Goliath's 6th birthday a couple days ago, they had teeth pulled. Lots of teeth pulled, huh, baby girl? Yes. So they're starting to recover now. They've had wet food so far and soft treats, so gonna put them on dry food this evening, and all should be right with the world. I've attached the tail now with 30-minute epoxy, and then I attached the control horns to the linkage. Then I epoxied, screwed, and zip tied the same lead weights that were on the previous fuselage. I'm assuming it's going to need nose weight, being a warbird, so I'm just going to assume it needs the same amount of weight, and then we'll see when we CG balance it. Then I drilled a hole for the throttle linkage to come through, drilled a hole for the choke linkage to come through. I'm going to clean off that little hump there, take care of that. So, coming along nicely. I've ordered the control line cables. I need those to come in yet so I can do the rudder and the tail wheel. I'm ready to put the engine on now and mount the ignition module. So we are coming along here. Here we are with the engine installed and the cowl retainer pieces installed. Those were epoxied on the previous fuselage, so I had to chisel them off, which they had 2 little pegs that would go into the firewall, and a lot of those broke off, but I was able to still get it aligned. So only time will tell if I aligned it correctly when I go to put the cowl back on, but I think I got it. So I think we're pretty good there. So now, what's left with this bad boy? I also installed the choke and throttle. I don't know if I pointed that out last time. So I've got to get the servo arms onto the push rods there for these two, and then get the gas tank hooked up, which is no problem, and do the radio. So she has come along a lot quicker than expected. I've also got to glue in these muffler plates pieces, and then on top here I've got to glue that piece. So, oh yeah, I guess I got to glue on the windshield too. So got a lot of gluing to take place here, but I'll probably do the radio first because, well, I don't know. We'll see. See what I decide to do. More progress to report. I've installed the pull-pull systems for the tail wheel, which are the 2 inside ones, and the left and right elevator, which are the 2 outside ones. And that was a bear to do, getting your hands into this small confined space and getting the tension right on these. My buddy recommended using, where is it? Using 60-pound test fishing lead wire and leader sleeves for the pull-pull. And now that I've done it, I feel like 30-pound probably could have been used and been fine. The 60-pound was hard to bend without kinking it, so trying to smoothly get it wrapped around the sleeve and then pull it tight was kind of a bear. So I ended up actually doing 2 of them wrong. Then I did all 4 of them, had way too much slack, so then redid all 4 of them again. So I've basically done 6 and 4. Yeah, 6 and 4, 10, I don't know. So those are done. I've created a new model in my Radio Master, which I needed to know what model number to use. So I went over the computer and hooked it up, found what my next model number was, because you can't trust what Radio Master says model numbers are available. By model number, I mean receiver number, so that you're linking an individual number to a specific receiver so as to connect the right plane. So when I did that, I first downloaded the planes from the transmitter to the computer, made my change by putting the number in there, uploaded the planes back to the transmitter, came back in my workshop, went to use it, turned on the transmitter, and usually it goes through and lists where each switch is at. And then when it goes through all the switches, it's done, it stops. Well, it just kept going through all the switches. It also, even though my throttle was completely down, it said that my throttle was not at idle. And when I accidentally hit the timer reset button, I noticed it changed trims. So it was just all jacked up. So after 2 hours later of researching and troubleshooting, it seemed to be a bad SD card or a corrupt SD card. I don't know if I can use the one that came with it again. I happen to have a another one that I could use. So I had to go to my backup models and backup radio settings. My models, this is May 20 something. My models were last backed up around April 11th, and then all of the radios folders were backed up in February. So I've definitely lost some progress of changes I've made on different models. So now I've got to keep an eye out as to what's going on, because I might see what I think are strange things because I've got to fix them again. So little bit, just a little bit frustrating dealing with that. 2 hours of life I'll never get back. So today I worked more on this. I've got the receiver connected. I redid the pull, and then I've gone down each item in the receiver and got them working, got them all set up. I've got to set up my throws. I've not done that for anything. And the wings, I need to make sure ailerons are going the right way, that retracts work, and set throws on that. I zip tied this in here, did some other zip tying, some wire management, installed the ignition in there, velcroed in the batteries that are going to go in there. I think I'm going to have to mount the receiver over here. It was in the center on the last model. It was kind of down there, but it was really hard to get to, and I think they might have changed their layout a little bit in this model. So I'm going to most likely put it right there. So I've got to get the gas tank in there and glue the canopy on. Then put the front end all back together. I need to re-drill the hole that this goes through, because it's just way too farging tight. So I got to do that. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do next except rest, because I've done a lot on this and now I'm tired and sore. So I'll give updates again when it's time. Okay, Goliath, you going to introduce this section? Nah, Just giving a tail hug. All right, so what have we done here now? All of the radio components have been proven to work and work in the right way. I've set up all my throws. I've now installed the radio. Chose to put it over there. And got the batteries in. Did some wire management here with the snake skin. I don't think it turned out too bad. And installed the gas tank fuel lines. Oh, I gotta put a zip tie on the carb nipple. Set up the fuel lines here like they were before. And installed a pilot. So I zip tied his legs. I velcroed his butt, velcroed his back, and put fish line around his waist. So I'm hoping that's gonna keep him where he needs to be. And then I just finished gluing the canopies on. So they say it's safe to handle in 3 hours, full set in 24 hours. It's been my experience that it's taken a lot longer than 3 hours to cure. I think it just is hard for the air to get into all the spaces. So she is rocking and rolling. What is left? What is left is to put on the front end. Nah, I think I'll wait on that. I need to run the engine and dial it in. So I think I'll keep the front end off for that. So just put the prop and spinner back on and balance it. Then she's ready to rock and roll. Happy to report that. She went along a lot quicker than I expected. I had in my mind that she was something I should dread doing, but it really didn't turn out all that bad. Today is engine run day to prepare for the Warbird weekend coming up. So I've ran the engine, dialed in the low and high end points. So the low is a little inconsistent. I can get it down to about 1380, but I don't really trust it to keep running. It's solid at around 1800, but it can also bounce around from 1300 to 1700. So I don't know if that's because I need to adjust the low end, or if it's just how this engine's going to be, or if it's because this engine is new and only has 4 flights on it. I'm thinking it's because it's new, but I'm new to gasoline engines, so I don't know the idiosyncrasies. I've got it tied up with a loop going back to a large screwdriver I pounded in the ground, and then also I've got a slip knot around the tail and then tie it around my porch. So 2 methods just in case, because that's a lot of power on this bad boy. So my one exhaust flew off. I knew when the manual said to use CA that I didn't trust that. I wanted to use epoxy, but I'm going to do something better with it. And the other one, the bottom is coming off, so it's just a matter of time before the top comes off. So I'm going to have to re-glue those. My ignition, no, not ignition. My, what do you call it? Receiver battery, one of them came off. The other 2 were rattling all around. I don't like how much they're rattling. I gotta do something better with that. I guess resting on these wires on the bottom makes it too mobile. So I'll do something better with those. So that's all I noticed. Gonna let it sit a little bit, and then I've put out some feelers to a couple guys to see how those RPMs sound. Oh, the prop is a Falcon 2713, I think. Pretty positive it's 2713. All right. Looking at the prop, it's actually a 2613. I know this is a Blackhorse video for the Focke Wulf, but I set up my Top Flight P51 on my Radio Master, but I've not had a chance to dial in the engine. So that's what I'm going to do. I can't figure out, without Matt's help, how to set up my idle up and down switch on that Radio Master so that you can, you know, turn your idle down when you need to and turn it back up when you need to. So that I'm going to have to ask him about again. We've tried a couple different methods with that, and I can't remember what airplane we've actually got it to work. I tried copying one, but it didn't turn out right. So this has a DLE 61, and I think it's a 2012 prop APC. Anyway, let's try to get this bad boy started and dial in that engine. I verified it is an APC 2012. Low I was getting 1450, and high I was getting 7560. So she's screaming at the top end, but hopefully all is good now. Just need to charge up batteries and everything else is rocking and rolling. And goodbye to Focke Wulf number 1. So much for that. I have fastened the batteries much better now, so they're not going anywhere. So that's taken care of. I've put on my side exhaust and not only epoxied it on, but screwed it on. I've ran the engine again, and I found a problem where if I run it to full throttle, then drop it back to idle, it may come down to 1600 RPM. It may come down to 3300 RPM. If it comes down to 3300 RPM, if I let it sit there for about 15 seconds and quickly burp the throttle from low to high to low again, then it will settle down to that 1500. So it's not consistently settling down to a low idle. And I've already come in hot on my other 2 landings, which is why it raised back up and cartwheeled and why I had to rebuild this whole thing. So I want this idle dialed in. So I'm going to end this video because the rebuild is complete. The 2 things that need to happen to it is getting that idle to be consistent and balancing it. Those are the only 2 things left to do. And having it out in the sun, that happened. I hear you really can't fix it, so I'm going to try a very low temperature hot iron, but I'm not thinking it's going to come out very well or stay once I put it flat again. So I'm going to end this video, and I'll do a different video on tuning the engine. My buddy Mike sent me step-by-step instructions on what to do, so I'm going to try to do that in the next few days. It's going to be like 90 95 to 97 the next few days with no rain, so it's going to be hot out there. All right, so hopefully you've enjoyed this video and found it interesting. I hope you will consider liking and subscribing. If you'd like to help fund future projects, you can click on my Patreon link in the description. But I wish you the very best of blue skies and good speed.